Well, welcome everyone to our space. Welcome to any future listeners, if there ever will be any, to our weekly Greene Tavern space. My name's Luke. I am the president of the NathanaelGreeneSociety. We, of course, are the North Carolina chapter of the Old Glory Club. This will also be co-hosted by various other officers from our chapter, as per the usual. We also have a guest. I'll give him the opportunity to introduce himself and explain the topic for tonight.
I suppose I'll do that. So I guess I'll name dox myself. My name's Drew. I'm the president of the Philadelphia chapter of the Old Glory Club, the Delaware Crossing Society. I'm here with Hunger, who's my propaganda officer, the minister of propaganda, as we like to call him.
Official title, public relations.
Yeah, official, quote unquote. That's what I put on the government forms anyway. Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to say is that we've got a super secret event for those of you who may or may not know. There is a private event that we are holding on Saturday at an unspecified location at an unspecified time. Only those with the privilege of membership in an Old Glory Club chapter will be able to learn the secrets, the esoteric secrets of where we'll be and what we're doing. Do you have anything to add to that, Hunger?
No, I can just tell you, if you are not a part of the OGC or your local chapter already, you're missing out on a lot of stuff. And as the propaganda minister, this is a very based, very secret, very esoteric event we're hosting, and we have so far, I would say, over 50 guests confirmed attendance, which is a mini event by itself. So if anyone doesn't know, we always have the annual conference in Tennessee, but because we're so many chapters all over the country, every region is likely to have, and it is already happening as we speak, already having, these very large local events. So, I mean, if you're not part of the OGC, like, what the hell are you doing here and why are you listening?
So true. But yeah, it should be fun. And if you want access to such things in the future, you join your local OGC chapter. Go to the website, look at the map, go to the list. They're there. They have email addresses. You can just do things and email them if you have what it takes.
You can just do things, and this is probably the biggest event we've hosted. So earlier, I would say maybe 6 months ago, was it 6 months ago in September, we had an amazing Valley Forge tour, which was
Sounds about
incredible.
right.
And over 30 people showed up as well. Most of them not from our chapter, the majority from our chapter, but many of them not from our own chapter. And that was a great event. And this is going to be the biggest one we have so far. And there's going to be many more events to come, especially on the East Coast. And I love the idea of getting the East Coast chapters all together because it's such a huge density of population. I mean, compared to the rest of America, we can pull in a lot of chapters in one area, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to feel like its own event, and it's going to be
Yes.
awesome. That's all I have to say on that.
Many East Coast, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, middle. What would you call the middle of the East Coast chapters are going to Mid-Atlantic? Yeah. Mid-Atlantic. Yeah, the many people from those chapters will be there. We're going to have some of the newer chapters as well, the Pittsburgh guys who've just been made official. There's a Harrisburg, Central Pennsylvania chapter that is deep in the works, very close to finalizing. They will be there. And come. Or well, I guess the tickets are closed now, right?
Yeah, tickets are pretty much closed. Yes, we will not be taking any more. I'm sorry if you missed your chance. Your chance is over, and
it's over.
You are gay and cringe for missing out. I'm sorry. Do you gentlemen from North Carolina have anything to say on that?
Well, other than feeling really insulted that I didn't get a ticket, no, nothing much. Although just to say, we're very happy to hear about all these events being hosted. And that's one of the, not the main reason, but one big attraction of the OGC is getting to meet other like-minded people, and these events are perfect for that. So if you've shamefully missed this one, then yes, there's going to be others like this all throughout the country, and you should keep your eyes on the ground for it.
Absolutely, especially as we're so spread out all over the country. I mean, America is absolutely huge. People outside of America don't understand how large the United States is. It's honestly insane. Like even from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, if you did that, it's like 6 hours. It's like a 6 hour drive. If you did that in Europe, you would be in 3 different countries. It's absolutely insane, all in one state practically.
The European mind cannot comprehend it.
They cannot. And so, yeah, it's going to be really important to have the local chapters pull resources together for their own events, and it's always a good time. It's very much a good time. We're very, like, I think Prudentialist had a great article actually just a few days ago about the digital identity and atomization. As fun as Twitter is, when as fun as Twitter is, and making fun of various people on the internet is, it's just so much cooler, like actually meeting the people you're interacting with and like getting into a room together. That's one of the things, both myself and Drew have attended, I think, all 3 of the national conferences. Is that
That's
right?
right. That's correct.
Yeah, and there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
I was
Can't be said
in
enough.
I was in the room while they were tossing around the idea of starting some kind of organization or other. But then I left because it was 3 in the morning and I had to start driving at 7 a.m. It was in a Holiday Inn in like Dixon, Tennessee, like at the first after party. A little inside
The deep
baseball.
esoteric lore of
Yeah.
the OGC.
But yeah, I think it's
The founding of the, yeah.
oh,
I know.
go for it.
Oh no, I was just saying you got to witness the founding of the OGC Central Deep State.
Yeah, but I immediately left though. Bad foresight there, but it was late.
Oh no, that's fine. You can write the dissonant biography about it
Yeah,
later.
I'll just have to get it ghostwrited or something.
Yeah, there you
Um,
Very few people can say I was there, when these types of things happen.
oh, there were probably like maybe 15 people in that room at that point.
I think I left around the same time as well because I had to catch a flight
Yeah.
out of Tennessee. So I think I left around 3 in the morning as well.
But I did want to say something else about just sort of the joining of chapters and getting involved. I mean, we talk a lot about doing events and stuff and like hanging out with the bros or whatever, but I think there's a lot of potential in just like young, high energy men getting in the same room together. I mean, that's just kind of how things happen historically. Um, I read this interesting book. I was made to read this interesting book in like, I don't know, like 10th grade of summer reading. And it was like the 5 beverages that changed history. And one of them was coffee. And the thesis was that like the coffee shops in sort of the late Renaissance and like the 18th century, the 17th and 18th centuries served as these kind of like network hubs for the most intelligent people to get, hopped up on caffeine and talk. And from there, a lot of things just started to spontaneously happen. And I think that fraternal organizations, societies like these, where we can get, the best people together and connect it up to other nodes in a sort of influence network, I think there's so much potential for things to just start happening.
go. Oh, absolutely.
Just endless amounts
Oh
of
yeah,
fun.
Alp, yes. The official, by the way, use the OGC affiliate link for Alp or something.
If there's one thing almost every member of the OGC I've met agrees with, it's that we stand for big tobacco.
So true.
Yeah, a lot of us came from actually this area. A lot of us came from Big Tobacco, to be honest. I think Luke and I are from around the Winston-Salem area, so we're very familiar with Big Tobacco in these parts.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, the North Carolina, Virginia, cross-border plantations they're very cool. I personally, I'm not a big fan of the pouches. I have a very funny story of the first time I tried my first Zin, and I just wasn't a fan. But I've been a tobacco smoker for some time, and I am a very big fan of American Spirits. And I believe the blacks are a North Carolina tobacco, I believe.
It's a North Carolina company, I think, but I don't remember where it's exactly based out of.
It might be. I think it might be a North Carolina company. Spirits are great. It's the only thing I smoke, and it's delicious.
It's also nice because it'll get you to not smoke too much because it's like $11 a pack.
Oh, not even that. I mean, just like Marlboros are total trash because like one Spirit cigarette, like I can just turn it off halfway through and come back to it later. Whereas with a Marlboro, because of there's so much chemicals and there's so much tar and there's so little tobacco, like it burns itself out in like 5 seconds. The difference in quality is actually insane for the price you're getting.
Yeah, you also, I'm a former smoker, and I used to smoke American Spirits here and there. You also, there's an incredible amount of drag that you have to, like, that you're pulling, that you almost run out of breath if you're used to smoking, quote unquote, normal cigarettes versus the Spirits. I would just be tired smoking. I would just be tired smoking Spirit cigarettes.
And you never have to relight a Marlboro. Okay, you never have to relight. If it burns, it's gonna burn all the way through. Like sometimes you actually have to relight a Spirit.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes a Spirit would actually last me a couple of smokes back in the day.
Oh, that's great. I've converted my dad to the Church of American Spirits. he's like a lifetime Winston smoker, I think.
Yeah. Very familiar with Winstons and Camels around here.
Oh man, if you're in Winston now, you can't escape the Camel because people like to use it for like quirky local branding. There's Camel stuff everywhere in Winston now. But it's not cigarette related. They just, if you were someone who didn't know much about the area, you'd be very confused if you ever visited.
I mean, it's a great brand. I mean, so I want your guys' opinion. What do you guys think of the menthol craze?
What do you mean, like how they tried to ban it, or just how much do you like the flavor?
The whole conversation socially. I guess, like, yeah, they tried to ban it. There was a very funny instance of like, because I remember the whole vape debate where it was like, oh, vaping is not for smokers to quit smoking. Vapors is for non-smokers to get into smoking. And it had the total opposite effect that was.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of like there's a lot of truth to that. Same with snus. When snus first came out,
Yeah,
people were saying snus is going to wean you off smoking. It was like, nah, I just use the snus while I smoke.
Yeah.
it's a pipeline.
Yeah.
The menthol.
I always thought
the menthol to Marlboro
the menthol
red
was
pipeline.
kind of like
Menthol is like
menthol was
objectively gross. Like it's probably awful for you. They kept it around for political reasons. I mean, it really is just like the favorite of the African American community, and so they just kept it on. I'm going to be honest, I really like menthols, but they are like very bad for you, and I can see why it can wean you onto smoking because menthols go down so much easier than regular cigarettes.
Yeah, I was a menthol, so I would smoke the Newport Blues, and my dad worked for Reynolds, so he or Camels. So and they also used to have the Crush. I guess they were Camel Crush or something, but I don't know, something about those. They tasted like I was eating a certs while I was smoking a cigarette, and there was something about it that I just absolutely used to hate.
Yeah, my first menthol was a Camel Crush, and like I mean it was a nice gimmick, like crushing the filter. I mean that was like
Yeah.
it's very ritualistic, like the way
Yeah, I
just the
would.
way people
Yeah,
get into smoking.
I
I mean that
would.
was cool, but the flavor was just overwhelming. I did feel like I was smoking like chewing gum.
Yeah, I would sometimes just crush a couple just to get that satisfaction of crushing something in a cigarette. I don't know what it was.
It's the monkey brain, just like it's just something you know, like using your hands in that way.
Well, and that is something like Big Tobacco is always famous for, was like having a lock on human psychology. I mean, it's kind of been superseded by like smartphones now, but back in the day, all the people making addicting apps now are making cigarettes,
That's
and they had
very
everyone
true,
remember.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the physical bit was the hardest for me. I just how I ended up getting like I was finally done when I decided to quit smoking, so I was like finally done. But it was, what do I do with my hands now? So I just would chew a lot of chewing gum, and I just cut up straws and would drive around with straws in my fingers. And I'm also a drummer, so I carried around an extra pair of sticks in my car. And so when I was done with holding the straw, I would just hold a drumstick and just play around with it, like while I was driving or whatever. And eventually, it was like, for me, it was like either I was drinking or I was driving, not both.
I wouldn't blame you.
But yeah, that's how eventually it was the physical part for me. So yeah.
I mean, that was the smart thing about vapes. You know, I mean, they're still popular. They're still fucking everywhere. I see like 22 people much younger than me, like 22-year-olds still vaping and stuff like that. But like those really did get the hand to mouth motion like pretty well, and that did. I think that did help people get off smoking, but it also turned people onto the other way because the pipeline just goes both ways.
Yeah, the genius of all that stuff, I think, and probably the reason I think it took off so much in the mid 20th century, was like it's something you can do while you drive. That was my main use for it. I didn't smoke for very long, maybe about a year, but it was a job when I was driving like 3 or 4 hours a day in a company truck where they allowed smoking. And
Oh
that's like
wow.
the appeal of it. Yeah, yeah, like that's like the appeal of it to me. It's like I'm on the road for an hour and a half at a time. Like I got to do something, But it's not a great. I mean, not the world's best habit, but
No, and that's rare.
yeah,
Like a company allowing smoking in the trucks. Like
Yeah.
I refuse to smoke in my
it was
car
kind of rad.
because I'm right-handed and I can't smoke with my left hand. I just can't do it. So my car is super clean. I would never smoke in my car.
Oh yeah, no, I would. Yeah, like I don't have any interest in smoking in my personal car. that's that's a whole different story.
Was there any topic we wanted to talk about on the list? Okay, no, I remember we wanted to talk about the events. We also wanted to talk about just broad organizing in general. I mean, for everyone, I know I can see who's in the chat, and a lot of familiar faces are in here. And as our president was saying, you can just do things. Like it's so honestly true that if you just, I don't want to sound like a boomer when you say build it and people will come, but like just putting out the word, yo, I'm doing this thing on this weekend. Who wants to show up? You'd be surprised how many people just jump on it because there's there's very few people who have the agency to plan an actual like outing and get people out of their routine and schedule, and it's kind of surprising how many people are willing to jump on board to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it really is. I don't know if you ever looked into the studies before about like, why it's good that, not everyone's an entrepreneur, because, in order to have an advanced economy, you actually have to have like large businesses where thousands of people work for you. But that's almost true of even like, I don't know. I don't want to like overextend the application, but that's almost true of the dissident right. It's okay that a lot of people don't have it in them to build an organization by themselves. That's okay. There's a lot of great, capable people who just don't want to do that. But if you build some infrastructure for them, they're happy to show up and do really productive work. And I think that's kind of what we're providing people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with that. It's not even like, I think our culture kind of ingrains a lot of latent kind of egalitarian priors. And like, if you go back to something like the way people saw things with like the great chain of being, it's like not everyone is going to take a leadership role. And that's actually not just okay, but a good thing. There actually do have to be kind of people down the chain executing lower level functions. And it's not some like knock against them. It's not that they are worthy of less respect. That's actually extremely important, and they're actually extremely valuable. And if you want to do anything at scale, I mean, you can't just have a bunch of like, you can't have a bunch of like leaders all trying to do their own thing. That kind of breaks into that kind of sort of atomization. That's kind of how the atomization begins. You tell too many people that they can, they can make their own life, and then you just kind of get this fractionating that occurs.
Well, yeah, and like there's a lot of people, leadership is like one important thing you can do, but like there's a lot of important things that, you might not want to ever hold a position in a club, but like you can do a whole lot of things that the leaders can't even do. Any
Absolutely.
person, yeah, like anyone in a business, if they're honest, will tell you that too. It's like I feel like I'm hardly doing anything. It's like all the people in the group are actually making everything happen. Like I just signed the paperwork. I mean, that's kind of an exaggeration, but there's also a lot of truth to that.
Everyone
But
has their role to play.
yeah, but the OGC is good because and maybe it's just because the like the average age in the the scene, if you want to call it that, is just going up a little bit. But it's good to be able to eventually settle down on a strategy or settle down on an organization. And so I'm glad to see kind of the OGC become that for the American, right? Something like this needs to happen in Europe. I have no idea what they need or how they're going to do that. But in America, at least, this, I believe, is a excellent kind of alternative. I mean, the only other one is probably Nick Fuentes, and that's kind of that's just a trap.
Oh God. Yeah, I'm happy you bring up that point, because I think because there are so many personalities on the dissident right, and I don't even know if the DR is the right term for it anymore, but everyone knows what I'm referring to.
It's the word
Because
we
there are
have.
so many personalities. Yeah, it's the only word we have. Because there are so many personalities, it's like there are definitely there are too many what's it called? There are too many cowboys, not enough Indians, obviously. And everyone just splinters off into doing their own thing, and then drama ensues. And I'm not going to get into any drama that's that's happening, but it's how do I say it? This is very indicative, for example, of how a lot of people outside of America see Trump, or what the right wing in America is doing with Trump. At the end of the day, it's like this is our hierarchy. This is the only. I remember during the election, like everyone was on top of their stuff. Like the Delaware Crossing Society, as a very new chapter, we're having discussions about this all the time, of like, what can we do? Who's going to a polling station? Let's send out this kind of tweet, this kind of message, all this stuff. And like, we're not affiliated with any Republican, or this is a totally non-political organization. We're not fundraising or doing anything, but we all came together for this election to do at least something, because this is just part of the hierarchy. This is just part of the hierarchy we exist in as being on the right.
Yeah, I mean, I live in like downtown Philadelphia, and I went to be like a poll watcher at like, a center city polling station, which actually was surprised. It was actually very well run. I was kind of surprised, but I was also told by the like point blank to my face by the election judge that like, this is, if you're going to do this again, this is not normal. Like we make a point here to run this extremely well. And if you were somewhere else, you'd probably be seeing a bunch of really shady shit. And this guy, I believe, is a Democrat. He was just straight up admitting it to my face, which I found very interesting. But really, I guess what I'm, there are ways that you can sort of, in a small way, affect a difference that way. And if you can find places to slot in and gather more by sort of gathering more information about how those things can be executed, by having connections to your local Republican council, you can figure out where people are needed, and how they can help best, even if it's minor.
That's something really easy to do too, is just find out whenever your local GOP meets, become a delegate, and you start having the ear of the people that are actually kind of like running the people that hand out the papers. That was my avenue, is that I basically got in good, became a delegate, found out who hands out the papers, started influencing, hey, who should we back, who should we not back, who's actually an actual right winger, and who's just kind of just I don't know, in it for the money, or just trying to get a state position. And then encourage people to hand out those flyers at their local church, and make sure that like everybody there knew the times to vote, where the voting locations were. um, and that was actually kind of like a really big step to get people actively involved, at just a very like really bare bones local level. And it only takes like, to become a delegate, like maybe an hour and a half of your time a month on like a Thursday night in my area. So it was something that was like easily doable. And I don't think most people realize that it's like, it's not very hard to do. It doesn't take up much time. It just takes like a little bit of effort to want to do something.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example of that. Like, for example, there's like, especially around elections, there's always town halls, going around. And I know people who have attended these town halls, and they'll get a chance to speak or ask a question, like on an issue that they're concerned about. And it's actually very hard for a politician to say no to your face. I mean, because one, it just looks bad optically, but two, politicians want to be liked. And, if you bring up an issue, they actually have to address it and like look you in the eye and say, "Oh, I should do something about that." Even something as minor as that, which is not much. But we know that that's not how like politics really happens, but that face-to-face interaction is like important.
But yeah, a lot of those like Republican councilman slots are just empty, waiting for someone to take them. Delegates, super important. Candidate selection is like something that everybody seems to know is very important, but then nobody does anything about it. And like, I think a good chunk of us are very steeped in the whole elite theory thing, and we all kind of very explicitly understand that the people who are embedded in these sort of managerial structures are extremely important to how things and get executed in the direction in which they move. So if you can get the right people into those places, whether through selecting the candidates before they reach the ballot, or by administration, the selection of personnel and administration, that could be extremely important.
Yeah, to play off that, I mean, normally counties have about for your precincts, they have like 5 to 10 slots per precinct, depending on how large your county is and how many people you have in there. And probably about 50% of them goes unfulfilled. And in our area, we had like a coup d'etat, and we like literally overthrew all 14 members of our Republican council in our county, and then established our own people that night. And in our last election in our county alone, we didn't lose a single election. Uh, like it was a clean sweep. Not a single Democrat won. And not just like they just didn't win by a little, but they got totally trashed. And that's just something that like you don't think about that. Oh, it's the people that we're putting up there. It's the poll workers we're using. It's the poll watchers we're using. It's just going to people's local church, passing out information to them, telling them times to vote, where to vote, like getting people signed up to vote. It's all that background stuff that's like super important.
This is what we mean when we say you can just do things.
Actually, Mr. Appeal to Heaven, I don't know how much info you're able to give. I don't want you to like get yourself in trouble or dox or anything. But is there any like more you can tell us sort of about like what your kind of position in your local party looks like, kind of how the sausage is made at that level?
Yeah, I can tell a little bit here. Sorry if there's a little bit of background noise. I'm driving. But what you have to do is you basically find out whenever they meet. It's always usually like in North Carolina, it's on Thursday nights for pretty much all the county politics. And then what you do is you have a yearly delegation that meets. And before, I think the deadline's March for my county, but you just fill out a delegate form and you send it to the county chair. And they basically sign off on it. You pay like $5 saying you're going to attend the county convention. And what ends up happening is the delegates vote on the leadership of the party for that county. And what you end up happening is for like years, boomers just kind of like negated this to just kind of like neocons. But we, for our last county convention, the kind of the neo, like it was like they were trying to strike back. And our coup d'etat last time, we brought 250 of our own delegates. We just had our friends all become delegates, and then they had their friends become delegates, and so on and so on. So we basically overthrew them. They tried to do a filibuster that didn't work. We put it to an election, kicked them all out. And not only did we kick them out, they like some of them actually moved, like physically moved their ad, like they left the county because they were so embarrassed. So we're still around, but they don't attend the meetings. But this last kind of meeting we had, which was our delegation meeting for leadership again, they tried to kind of do what we did. But instead of coming with 250 people like we did last time, we came with 550 people. So, I mean, they brought like 100 of their own people and still got trounced. It's it's not as complicated. If you ask a boomer, they'll make it sound really complicated. It's literally just like a form you fill out on the GOP website for your county, and then just turn it in.
Wait a minute. So it's really that easy? You just go online, you sign a form, pay like your $5, processing fee,
Yeah,
and you're a
it's that.
delegate for the county.
You're for a year. So you say a delegate
For
for
a
the
year,
county for
okay.
a year. Yeah,
Okay.
and now if you are in a precinct that has like lots of voters in it, and you have like it's going to be really dense with delegates. So like some of the delegates will be alternate delegates. So you want to make sure that you even have alternate delegates and backups in case people don't show up for the voting. So what you end up having is like my precinct has like 10 delegates. And then we have like 2 alternate delegates. And like some places they had like 10 delegates, but they had 20 alternate delegates because just that much people were like interested in being involved. And it was a more highly dense area with like large neighborhoods in it. But
Yeah.
literally it's you go online or you just start going to a meeting and then start asking questions and say like you can fill that form out in person too. The $5 is just to attend a conference because you get a badge or something like that they scan you in when you come into the conference. But other than that, it's like a super easy process to do. So it doesn't take up, like I said, I go to one meeting a month, and sometimes if it's not like a really important meeting, you can like skip it. It just hit all the main important ones. Like if your state speaker of the House is coming to your county Republican Party, make sure you show up to that one because he'll ask questions and he'll have his like little aide de camps with him. And those are the people that you want you want them to hear you ask those questions. And if you can coordinate with multiple friends asking the same questions, they'll start thinking, oh, the people are interested in this thing here. Oh, they actually want constitutional carry in this state. Maybe, yeah, jot that down. We'll talk about that in our next session. So, they'll go to another county. And if you got friends in that county, tell them ask the same questions. So as they're like going to all these like little meetings across your state, they'll start realizing like, oh, this is what people care about, because they're really gaining their metric of what they feel like the local populace wants based off of who they feel like are the most involved. So we had boomer politics for like 40 years. That's just because the boomers were involved in this kind of stuff. But you can really like shift the paradigm now by just getting your people in, asking the questions, and they'll start, they're politicians. They're going to start conforming to whatever they feel like the voters are wanting.
Hey, so one more
that's kind of it
question on
there.
this line.
Yeah.
To what extent, I mean, like in your experience at least, to what and like, I'm not sure how your county is just is gerrymandered, but to what extent do these county GOPs impact like state general assembly and state senate races?
I'll call them like your local state senators as.
Yeah. Like the North Carolina General Assembly and the North Carolina State Senate.
We did like such a good job in our county that we end up becoming like a Trump headquarters for the election. So if you're doing a really good job and you have a lot of energy, like big GOP comes in and they're like, hey, what are you guys doing here? Because whatever you're doing is working and we want to be part of that. So we were one of, I think, 3 or 4 delegations that were considered like a Trump headquarters in the state, where like it would be nothing for like someone of the Trump family like members to walk in, or Watley or any of these guys to come in and start talking to like your delegates and your people, trying to figure out like, hey, what are you doing? What are you guys doing that's working here? Because you guys are putting up results and these other counties next to you aren't, or maybe you guys can give them some guidance.
Well, I mean, okay, so that's good to know too. But what I was getting at is and like also you cut out for a second on my end. That could have been my fault, so maybe I missed this. But like when it comes to the sort of people who get selected to run in these like state general assembly type races, do those endorsements sort of flow through the county or do they flow through the state?
It actually flows through the county. Like we decided in my county who we were going to back in the primary election. So your primary elections, that we decided like who we were going to back based off of who we liked, and we were just going to back our people that we felt were the most right wing. And like I even like made suggestions myself, like, yeah, we shouldn't back this guy because he was weak on this issue like 2 years ago. And they just basically pulled his name off and was like, yeah, we're not backing him. Now, they will still run because they still filed. But when we draft basically what we call them our yellow sheet, we draft a yellow sheet with who we're backing, and then we pass that out at the polls. And usually who's ever on that sheet is who wins.
Okay.
So whoever controls the sheet in our county controls who's winning. So as long as your people are in and you're writing the propaganda, then you're going to win. And like I took that and I passed out like 100 copies in my church, and then made sure like all the families in my church went out and voted. So, I mean, those are all like little like things you can like you said, you can just do things once you start getting those good inroads with, getting your friends in there. And they'll kind of be like shocked at first because they're like, oh, wow, all these like 20 and 30-year-olds are all of a sudden in the meeting, and they think it's great until you vote them out. Then they kind of get pissed. But then it's like, now it's all you and your buddies now running the show rather than like them. So it's kind of hilarious, but that's how it is.
Well,
so
and this is so staying on the theme of you can just do things. These big parties, we are a big country. We were talking about that earlier. We're a huge country. And part of having a huge national party in a huge country is you have hundreds, if not thousands, of these little, like, I'm not sure you call them, maybe pressure points. So people get so discouraged because they're like, well, like, we'll never take over the RNC. And, like, yeah, you won't take over the RNC for a while, but you can take over your county. And if you take over enough counties, like, you can get a critical mass in, like, your state's general assembly. Or maybe you can win, like, a maybe lower tier stateside race. And all of a sudden, like you're not getting, your immediate victory overnight, but you're getting substantial progress. And if enough people are doing that throughout the country, all of a sudden you have some real results.
Another target is young Republicans clubs.
Yes. I don't know.
I have my eye on the Philly Young Republicans. Their social media presence is just like 1,000% retarded.
Well, I've also heard, I don't know if this is true across the country, but I've heard that sometimes you can join those quote unquote young Republican clubs up to the age of like 40. So if
Yeah,
you're not,
probably.
That is true.
yeah, so like if you're not in
For
college or something,
example,
you don't have to
in
worry
New
about it.
York.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, that is true. You don't even have to be a college student to join a Young Republicans Club. Like New York, the New York Young Republicans Club is huge. It's got literally thousands of people, and they have their own specific cafes in like literally downtown Manhattan that they meet in. And yeah, like there are still people in their 30s who show up to those meetings. It's never been easier to get into like to do these things at the local level and to do local government action, because all of the people there are just either old or women or just female.
Well, this is actually true in general. Like we do like to complain about baby boomers a lot, but one thing that's really important to kind of keep in mind is like if you're a young person with some agency, this is kind of like your golden age because we're kind of entering the sweet spot, and I suspect we'll be here for maybe like 5 to 10 more years. But like they're still in like the boomers are still like active enough because they're staying active into older age. So like it's still active enough that there's all this infrastructure out there. Like clubs is what I mean. So like there's a million clubs for any sort of interest, and they still exist because the boomers who run them are still living. But they're also old enough that like even though they aren't, disposed to it personality wise, they're almost just forced to pass the torch if you show up because they're simply running into the hard limits of their age. So if you,
Yeah, and
yeah, it's like, yeah,
they're slowing down, and they can be bombarded very easily by alternative media and
oh,
just
exactly.
other types of activism.
Yeah, but the point is, those clubs are still there. Like you can still actually join them and take them over. This is like this is like the golden age of being able to do that. Because if you wait too long, like if there's a club and everyone dies in the club doesn't stay forever. The club will just like, you know, just fall apart. Like it'll just cease to exist, and you'll have to build it from scratch if you ever wanted to do that again. So this is true in politics. This is true in hunting. Right now we're in this kind of weird spot in hunting where like game animals are preserved by, the state and national wildlife association, and they preserve certain animals for the sake of hunting. And it's basically funded almost entirely by hunters, like hunters paying their fees and that sort of thing. And again, you're kind of like in this golden age because all these game animals are still around and they're still here in large numbers, but the boomers are getting a little bit older and they can't hunt like they used to. If you want to get into hunting, now's a great time because there's plenty of animals and not as many hunters. If you wait 30 years and nobody ever got involved in it, state wildlife and federal wildlife is going to stop promoting those animals so much, and it'll be very hard to build hunting back up again. And this is true of anything. Like, you ever want to get into ham radio? Now's your time to get into ham radio. If you ever wanted to get into classic cars, now's your time to get into classic cars. Because if these things completely atrophy, it's very hard to build them back up again. It's also true in politics. Now, politics is more durable, but still, now's your chance kind of to get in, kind of, and grab some influence before something else takes its place.
Yeah, as the boomers age, they will want to bequeath their responsibilities onto the younger people with more energy. This sort of demographic transition we're undergoing with the relatively large boomer population who've been entrenched in their positions, who have sort of gate kept Gen X out by their, more accrued, the fact that they have more accrued experience. But now they're kind of aging out. They're getting old. They're losing their energy. So I think that's kind of one of Stormy Waters' points is he just sort of found a boomer that like he could just, get in the good graces of. And all of a sudden he was passed down a bunch of connections and influence. And I think there's a lot of that can be found, especially in the political world, in these sorts of nodes of influence, as I like to think of them. There's a lot of these sort of nodes in a sort of network out there that can be captured. And I think organizations like sort of motivated organizations like us could put the people out there sort of capture these nodes and hook them up to a central clearinghouse, like, an Old Glory Club chapter.
And what's funny too is like, that's actually the best. This is one of the best ways you can actually kind of honor your parents if you're wanting to think of it through the lens of, the Bible too. Because here at the Nathanael Greene Society, we are a Christian subchapter of the Old Glory Club. We like to be clear about promoting that. And, one way you can honor an older person or even like an older generation is to let them know that you actually do care about some of the stuff they're passionate about. Now, sometimes boomers are passionate about stuff that just doesn't matter, like hobbies. Sometimes it don't really matter that much, but things like politics, they did take that kind of stuff seriously. Like they took their job seriously in most cases. And, I think they appreciate, even if they don't realize it. I think they do appreciate it when young people come up to them and say, "Hey, like we don't see eye to eye on everything, but like I take this like I take your life's work seriously, and I would like to see it continue so that it doesn't pass away when you do." I think a lot of I think a lot of them would be very receptive to that kind of message.
Yeah, it's a strange dynamic. I mean, not to boomer bash too much, because the boomers are still very useful and still, we shouldn't be hoping for the day of the pillow. There will be negative consequences towards that, but it was an interesting dynamic how the boomers completely shut out Gen X, and now they're too old to do anything. And how do I say it? Like, it's funny how that attitude has changed over time. Now they want, like, they're encouraging like young people, or like millennials aren't young anymore, but to them, like, boomer parents have millennial kids, so they want their millennial kids to actually participate in the things that they're doing, that they refuse to pass on to Gen X. It's very strange that how that happened.
No, that's a good point too about how we're all kind of the children of the boomers in some sense. Like my baby boomer father, like I have younger siblings that are Zoomers. So there's some cases where like boomers have Zoomer children. Like it's not. It's almost like
God
sometimes they learn
bless.
their lesson with Gen X, but yeah, I don't know. We're all kind of their children in some way, and I think they're kind of realizing that it's time to finally pass on some of that stuff. And part of it for them, is Silent Generation retired really early. That was kind of one of their things, and so a lot of them just got their positions very young, and for some reason, kind of got this mindset that they had to hold on to it as tight as they could. I'm not sure why. Maybe they got this mindset that they were the ones who had to do it, and they just never left that mindset. That's probably a lot of what it was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm very thankful for I'm very thankful for my own boomer dad, and I'm not gonna like give personal details or whatever, but I've seen other boomers where to encourage the day of the pillow thinking. It's just like I just see some parents charging their children rent, and it absolutely like drives me up a wall. Like this. I don't want to get too much into like this kind of commentary unless you guys are cool with that.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, I as as a as an ethnic, seeing boomers take money from their children in the form of like rent in the house these people have lived in their entire lives, just like literally drives me up a wall. I mean, I understand when it comes to people who are lower income, like,
Sorry about that.
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. That was my fault.
Ah, no worries. Okay. It's like I understand what for people who are lower income, like, yeah, people who live in under one house, it's like, yeah, everyone should contribute. No one has a problem with that. No one has a problem with people with no child should have a problem with contributing to the family, if especially if he's living under the same roof. But the idea of like parents charging their children rent is it's so upsetting to me, because it's like parents aren't supposed to take money away from their children. Parents are supposed to pass on what they actually have. And this was a whole mentality that the boomers just didn't. this just didn't take. I mean, they inherited so much from the silent gen or the greatest generation, and they're passing on so little. It does fuel a lot of that resentment that you just see with people like under the age of 35. It's incredible.
I've always wondered, kind of touching on that. I've always wondered if some of that had to do with that it was kind of drilled into boomers that I'm a younger Gen Xer, but one of the stigmas around Gen X is that we didn't have responsibility, and it wasn't that we didn't necessarily have responsibility. We just kind of took a little bit of a different path, and you can talk about a million reasons why that happened. But it was always seen as like, oh, we weren't responsible enough. And I've kind of heard that said from older millennials as well, that some of those ideas were kind of drilled into boomers that we were not responsible, and like that was a particular way of teaching us a responsibility. Now we can obviously talk about why we couldn't get those particular opportunities to us, but they saw like, oh, we're living at home longer, and they saw, I guess, like they saw that as a way of being able to contribute to the household. I don't know. That's not necessarily taking up for a boomer. It's just an observation I've seen.
Well, and part of it was, like I keep referencing their parents, the silent generation, but I think part of it was like boomers seem so harsh to us because they were raised by harsher people, and I don't even mean that as a value judgment. People used to just have harsher upbringings. Like, I mean, it's just a reality of life, and once American kind of post-war prosperity sat in, which really came about while the boomers were being born. That's why they were born. There was just a better economy, and that really kind of fueled that. Like once that prosperity set in, there really was almost like a panic. I think there was some in the silent gen, but then you saw the panic become more obvious in boomers, where it was like, now that we don't have like these harsh conditions as children anymore, like I'm afraid that my children will be like too soft to deal with the outside world. And so they tried to come up with mechanisms to kind of replicate that. And like, I don't know if that was a good idea. And I think that's what a lot of us are kind of pushing back on now, is that actually wasn't smart, because or at least like the way they went about it wasn't smart, because it actually kind of contributed to the problem in ways they didn't understand. But yeah, I don't think in a lot of cases it was like pure malice. It was almost like them trying to cope with a fear they had that wasn't entirely ungrounded, but they just didn't know what to do. And a lot of them kind of gravitated towards like ineffective solutions that ended up being counterproductive. So that's kind of like my, kind of boomer, like arguing from their perspective. I think that's kind of like what they were seeing, and that's what they tried to do. But obviously it wasn't always like effective.
I mean, I can speak about
On
this
the
myself. Oh, go ahead.
on the contrary, I think the silent gen was the first generation to actually, invest in suburban housing with access to interstate highways. And this is like, if you want to go as far back as like the Lowell projects, or so the immediate like California projects immediately after that. Like the first real suburbs, we have like fully independent houses that look like sort of modern suburban ecology that you see today. Like all of that was very new to the silent gen, and that was sort of the petri dish in which the boomers were raised on. Like they were raised in an ecology where essentially the silent gen all had children at the same time, where every other neighbor that you had children of the very same age as you. Like nowadays, like if you grow up in a suburb, maybe 1 in 10 households has a kid roughly your age, but for the boomers, almost every kid was their same age group. They had a much closer network of friends to actually, grow up with in these suburbs. But, um, you know, subsequent generations didn't actually have this luxury. Um, it's it's really bizarre to actually see how this develops in real time if you actually look at the housing prices. But it's it's very hard to articulate the actual generational development as it went along.
No, it is. I mean, there's just so many factors that go into play. Yeah, you're right. I mean, like, it's hard for us to imagine living in a world where the majority of people are young. I mean, just to be, like, frank about it. I mean, like, we just can't imagine that. Like, the world we live in now, I mean, what is it, like, 60% of America's population is over the age of 45. You know? Like, that's enormous, like, that makes a big difference on your country's culture, especially when so many of the young people are actually immigrants. So, like, if
Oh
you're
yeah, I mean the Charlotte area is terrible.
Yeah.
I mean I think 40 to 60% of all uh, like people born in Charlotte, their parents aren't from North Carolina or they're immigrants here. So you have like the young population that exists. And I don't live in Charlotte or Mecklenburg County. I live in a county outside of that. But the young people in your area, I mean, you don't really have a lot in common with them either, which is kind of tragic for community building. And I think about like my own, I live in like a fairly middle class, like middle class neighborhood. And like me and my wife, we have 2 children and maybe one other out of the 10 houses that live on my street. I think one of them have like kids our age. The other ones are kind of like either in high school or, you know, like leaving the house. So the boomers, they kind of had it a little bit, I don't want to say easy, but they had like a big peer group of people they grew up with to learn from. And that's just as like millennials just didn't have that.
No, I mean, I see it myself in my own area. Like, I can tell you, like, in my neighborhood, which is it's a high income area. I've seen the people who have been moving into the neighborhood, and I can say they do not fit the standard American profile.
They're Indians,
That's
you
all
can
I'll
say
say.
here. They're Indians, you can
Many
say it.
such cases.
Yeah, the neighborhood I grew up in is my parents still live
Yeah.
there, and it's probably about a quarter of the neighborhood is Chinese people who are not there all the time because they're just investing in the property, or they're Indian, or another quarter is an Indian. So it's probably only half white. When I grew up, there was like literally one guy had a Mexican wife, and that was it. And that was like, oh,
Well,
interesting.
well, they're pricing people out too. So something I've noticed is that they'll live multi-generational. They'll buy $1 million or a $900,000 home, which is a lot for the area here in North Carolina, and they'll live 3 or 4 families deep in a home. And that's just something that Americans don't do. We're not going to live with our cousin's family, our parents' family, her parents' family, and then my brother's family, and we have like mattresses strewn all over the floor, and a TV leaned against the wall watching cricket.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, I can tell you from personal experience. I grew up in kind of an in between of those two. I mean, I obviously had my parents and my siblings, but I did have an uncle and an aunt living with us in the same house, and my grandparents for a little bit of time before they moved. And I can tell you, if Americans don't do that, my childhood was probably a different experience of that. But it you see how it works, and it's stressful on the adults, but it's also very easy in terms of like social capital because your family is the first step you take towards social capital. Your family is the first network you really step into, and having those access to those resources does give you a leg up on people who live just, like a couple and like one or two kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. That does give you a leg up because it's a division of responsibility. I'm not saying Americans should live like that. I'm just saying that's something that people could consider.
I don't think generational living is all that bad where your parents move in. I don't think you should send them off to the old folks home. But when you have in your like brother and your second cousin, and then they all have like 5 kids, and your neighborhood has like 3 school buses picking up the Indians, that's where it's, Americans can't compete at if you have like a 4 or 5 income household of everybody just piling in cash and driving the home prices up. And that's like one of those things that like Americans aren't going to do that. And I don't think there ever will be ready to do something like that, just based off of kind of the Anglo heritage that we have here. That's just not something that we're going to ever do. But because we won't do that, the Indians will always have a leg up when it comes to buying property. And they will buy up entire streets or neighborhoods almost. And you'll notice that people will just basically just flock those neighborhoods. And they're not like high crime neighborhoods either. They start to like fall apart because they don't take care of anything besides using duct tape. So, and this is just
Absolutely.
things that I've
Yeah,
seen.
Sorry, I've seen this myself. It's absolutely true. And another thing to not discount is how much assistance they're getting. Not even from just their family, but the absolute social benefits they farm for all of these resources. Off the charts, insane.
Oh, and there's preference to like them being hired too. I've got a lot of friends in tech, and they'll say like, "Man, I am the last white dude in my job right now, or in my sector. Like everyone else is all Indian, and I spend my day being lectured by them, from prompts they write on ChatGPT to like lecture me about not doing my job or something, even though like that's their lane of responsibility."
Yeah, you didn't have to expose me like that, Colt.
It is literally a story I've heard from a lot of guys at my jiu-jitsu gym. They're all like IT guys, and that is like the most common story I hear is just, them trying to scheme ways out of doing their job and passing the blame on you, and then like reprimanding you with like a ChatGPT prompt.
Yeah, that's what I go through with work right now. The account that I'm on, so I work in IT, and we're essentially contracted to other companies, and there's the account I think has about 30 people on it, and there's only 2 Americans. And the account we're working on is a pretty big company in America. So it's either offshore, which, for those that are not in the know, offshore 99% of the time means India. There's a few nearshore, which is they're in Mexico. So there is this other that's not really been talked about a lot, but there's also nearshore consultants that are also somewhat displacing Americans in tech, and that is usually in places like Argentina, Mexico, a few places like South America. But yeah, about 30 people on the account. There's only 2 Americans. It's me and another guy that's in California. And yeah, it's what you're describing is pretty much what we go through every single day.
Yeah, this phenomenon is totally real. I have personally witnessed it as well. This was like 10 years ago. I was in Houston working in the oil and gas industry, and the IT department at the company I worked for that I was pretty adjacent to was just like, it was like 100 people and they were all Indian and like they all knew each other. And I was like, how did this happen? Me 10 years ago did not understand all this stuff quite yet. But now looking back, it's very obvious that it was the standard course that we all know happens.
Yeah. I went through something similar in when the recession hit in 2008. About a year and a half prior to that really hitting hard, you know, people in tech know usually that tech is like the first kind of like it's like a little indicator that the market is not so good. Yeah, I was a contractor at the time, and I was working for a big health insurance company in their IT department. And yeah, I just got there one day, and they told me I had about 2 weeks to go, and that essentially everybody in that particular department that was it was getting all shipped to offshore, and so that was my first real introduction to that. And during that time, it was almost impossible to find a job in tech because everything had moved to offshore. And what I'm seeing now is 10 times worse than it was back then, and it was awful then. And I was in my mid to late 20s at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I had an uncle who was laid off during the recession, and very similar story with with that company he worked at. But I wanted to ask you guys this question. I haven't been on Twitter most of the day, but I did notice today is Liberation Day, and Trump has signed the whole tariff package. What do you guys think? Um, do you think that the tariff package will actually affect the American labor market and like stop, you know, the offshoring of jobs, or at least stop the importation of foreigners to American jobs? What do you think that will have an effect here actually?
Well, um, it's really hard to tell because I know there's some kind of people that are anti-tariff on the right, but they're kind of coming from like an Ayn Rand kind of perspective that you should be able to do whatever you want with your company. But I think the real play here is we have to start convincing people on the right that it's not morally right to ship American jobs overseas uh, and have foreigners do jobs that we can just do fine here without any help from overseas. And I think that's like the biggest thing right now. I think it'll affect certain sectors of the market. Maybe some goods will be more, some will be less, but it, they need to sell. They need to sell the idea that this is a morally correct thing to do, rather than we're going to make money off of this. Like this is going to make Americans money. It needs to be like the framing needs to be like this is the moral high ground that we're taking here. I think JD Vance could actually articulate that.
Well,
That's all I have on that.
yeah. So the other thing too is like just from a purely economic perspective, because like so many people like to make the argument on tariffs, and this is fine. Like this is actually probably like the most noble argument, but they'll just say like I'm willing to eat the economic cost for like my higher ideals, whether that be like cutting off immigration, whether that means like giving jobs to people who don't have college degrees. That's fine. I mean, and that probably is like the most noble argument, but there actually are economic arguments to make for tariffs also. So one of the things we're learning is that in so American business for the last like 30 to 40 years, probably 30 years, has been really big on being as efficient as possible. And, this comes with the adoption of just-in-time delivery. That was a huge change in American manufacturing and American service. This whole idea that you don't keep a lot of inventory, you keep as little staff as possible. Instead of making money by maximizing cash flow, you make your profit by cutting cost. That's all like kind of cutting edge theory, or it was last time that American business saw a big shift in leadership style. But one thing we're learning, and this is what COVID taught us, is that being that efficient makes you very fragile. And so when something unexpected happens, like being as efficient as possible is theoretically the best you can do for your company from a monetary perspective if everything goes right. But if not everything goes right, so like say there's another COVID, say there's a war, like what if we had a war with China? Like where are we going to get half our manufacturing from? Or like what if we got into a conflict with the EU? Like the EU builds most of our naval vessels. There's like a national security risk here, and there's even an economic risk. Like if you don't keep any inventory on hand because you're trying to be efficient, and then the like your logistic network gets shut down for a month unexpectedly, well, you're just going to go out of business. You know, it's actually bad business to be too efficient in that sense, and we're learning that with immigration too. Not only is it bad for the country, it's not even really good for business. Like, it causes really weird conflicts within your company culture. It like opens your company up for fraud, like the sort of fraud you don't know to look out for because it's not common among American workers. There's all sorts of things like that go wrong. And so tariffs are kind of part of that. Like the idea is to help reshore critical industries to the United States, and it may be a little bit inefficient, but it'll make the economy more robust. It can survive shocks easier, and also it's a national security issue too.
Yeah,
Really,
I think.
Oh no!
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I think that we'll probably see some instability at first, because I just think that's just part of it. Like obviously, I've seen a few people talk about their stocks or their crypto. I'm pretty sure that that the Dow and the S&P will hate this, and it will probably be red for a few days, and just until things kind of get figured out and balanced out. Then yeah, sure. But I think in the long run, yeah, what Luke is saying is correct. The one thing I have noticed though is, and I don't know how I quite feel about it, because I think that there's positives to it, but there's also negatives. I've noticed that there are more and more international companies moving operations to the U.S. And like, while that's good because hopefully that these jobs will actually go to Americans, there's that concern of, do we actually build anything here? The hope is that we would actually start, not only making these things here in America, but like American businesses would actually start up. And I'm noticing it's more and more international companies moving their operations to the U.S., which again, good thing, because that creates jobs. But I'm wondering, like, what kind of effect would that have?
I don't know. I mean, so there's a couple things with Trump too, and this is some areas where we wouldn't be fully on agreement with him. So for one, Trump is perfectly fine with courting, like what he would call like high value immigrants. Like that's been abused by the left to just mean like any person from another country. But Trump really does like the idea of getting like high level businessmen from other countries to come here as citizens. And so, I part of this could really just be Trump hoping that some of these big officials from like, I don't know, Japan, India, China, or Europe just decide to become citizens. Another thing too, though, is that part of the problem with outsourcing a lot of your industries is that your native population loses the ability to produce those things, is because they just forget. Like like there's not another generation that comes along and knows how to do it. And so I think it could also be a gambit to just be like, hey, we're gonna let I don't know, like Nippon Steel come here, or we're gonna let you know chip manufacturers build their stuff here. We're going to let Toyota build their batteries here. There's a big plant opening not too far from me in the coming years to do that. But part of it could be just a gambit like, hey, we need to teach our native workers how to do this stuff. And if that means we have to bring in foreign companies for a few decades just to get a new generation up to speed, maybe that's just the price we have to pay. I don't know. That could be part of it too. But I'm not exactly sure. I mean, a lot of it's just for taxes as well.
Yeah, I can give you a good example of that actually. If you guys remember the fucking the Biden Chips Act, which was a total scam. It was absolutely retarded from the beginning. But in theory, the Chips Act was supposed to reshore semiconductor production into the United States, which actually kind of succeeded, because TSMC, which is the semiconductor manufacturer in Taiwan, did open up a plant in Arizona. But from what I hear, they're having problems getting that off the ground, and I think they are going to have to import some Taiwanese executives and managers to that facility. I mean, that's just one example. While at the same time, speaking of which, Intel, the company Intel, was already manufacturing its own chips, and Intel is an American company. TSMC is Taiwanese. They were already manufacturing their own chips, and they are doing absolutely terrible. And they never received a cent from the CHIPS Act that Biden passed.
Yeah, a lot of the manufacturing is a lot of sort of embedded knowledge that comes with actually performing the process. And to your point earlier about us forgetting that, I mean, I think it's even worse than that. It's just sort of like you see so many like places in the Midwest and well everywhere. I mean, even in Pennsylvania, you see it. The Rust Belt, as it were. That like these places are just sort of decaying, and I don't think we're just forgetting how to do things. I think that like it's funny. I see a lot of discourse about this sort of like aristocratic leisure of being a NEET, but like I think that the vast majority of people that when they don't have anything to do, they're not gainfully employed, they don't have some task to perform, they just kind of degrade. There's just like a spiritual degradation that occurs, and it's more than just forgetting how to do things. It's like not being spiritually ennobled by being able to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, so like aristocratic leisure is sort of a meme. Like there's some
Oh
truth
yeah.
to it. There's some truth to it, but like it really only applies to people who like are very intelligent and also very educated, and by freeing them from the necessity of labor, they have the ability to like employ their skills in really unique ways that benefit society in the long run. So for example, if you've got someone who's like a like brilliant classically trained guy who really has a gift for poetry, well maybe someone like him can benefit from aristocratic leisure because he can really devote himself to writing. But like if you want an example of what quote unquote aristocratic leisure does to like middle class or even like kind of upper middle class people, like look at those guys who get into fire. You know, they like retire early and then they are like so bored they basically just kill themselves, either directly or they just like pick up drugs because there's nothing for them to do. Like it's a terrible way to live.
It's kind of like you talk about like the upper middle class, and I kind of see this in some of the upper class, like upper middle, upper class neighborhoods that I'm familiar with. That their children are basically they're like trust fund babies. They're most of their life is just centered around like going to like brunch and the newest microbrewery that opened up, and that's not actually good for society. That these people that have the capital to do things, they're just basically blowing it on like traveling Europe and going to brunch every weekend and then just drinking lots of beer and then doing lines of coke. So I mean, like there is a certain level of like aristocrats that have to exist, but I think we have like an overinflation of people that think that they're actually in the aristocrat class, but they're actually not. uh, I don't know if you guys kind of see that in kind of some of your like micro spaces around your city.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of middle class people LARPing as aristocrats. in many There are many such cases, and it the thing is like it
They
doesn't
don't
even
even
have
have
to
like
be
good
this
degrees
way.
either. Is the like the thing, like they went to school, but they went to like a
Yeah,
state school, and I'm not knocking state schools or anything like that, but it's not like, oh, I went to Harvard or I studied abroad at Oxford and I'm classically trained and the great classics and great books of the West, and I'm pontificating these high ideas to the plebes or anything like that. It's literally
not
just
at
going to
all. Yeah,
brunch.
yeah. Don't
And a
pretend
lot
like you
of,
went to
and
an Ivy
even,
League.
I mean, a lot of people at Ivy League schools are kind of retarded too. So
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, like, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, we've definitely had everyone has talked about this. Like, people like Oron and so have talked about overproduction of elites, but like, it doesn't have to be this way because let's take, for example, I'm very familiar just by reading the Russian aristocracy in, let's say, like the 19th century. They were not serfs; they were aristocrats. They had tens of thousands of serfs, under their belt, and they could do their leisurely poetry and science and academia and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, when the state called on them, they had to fill up all the military roles. They had to fill up all the officer positions, or become high level, or had to be filled up into the bureaucracy, because they were given freedom from labor by serving the state. I don't think that would completely fit the American context, but something along those lines
No,
that we used to have.
It doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, like, it does and it doesn't. But there's actually a great Russian novel called Oblomov. I don't know if you've read it. It's kind of like Don Quixote of the Russian elites, and just kind of like the absolute kind of retarded leisure that they were starting to get to at the kind of course of the end of the empire before the Soviets took over. Maybe the best example would be maybe your like Virginia Cavalier class that existed, but I mean even that doesn't really exist anymore.
I mean, there's also, for example, just the Harvard Aviation Club were the first World War I fighter pilots.
Yeah,
those were all elite kids.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was that. A lot of those guys went to the American French. What is it, escadrille? Or I'm blanking on the name, but the Lafayette French American escadrille or something like that. Like where they before America actually got directly involved in the war. All of the fighter pilots in World War I that were American were flying for the French, and they all came from very elite institutions. And these young guys were seeking adventure and war and whatever comes along with that for them. But we don't have that. Like our elites aren't interested in that anymore. They're interested in like actually like low class kind of things that would have been low class, like hanging out at a tavern all day with basically a microbrewery. And I'm not knocking microbreweries. I like not microbreweries just as much as the next guy does. But I see those same people now, instead of engaging themselves in these like kind of high pursuits, they're engaging themselves in like very what they think is high class, but it's actually just kind of a low class, like peasantry for all of history that existed, and rather than devoting themselves to a more of a noble good.
No, they're not interested in any pursuit that has like actual skin in the game. That's the full story of it. They don't care. It's all performative. It's looking like an aristocrat, not actually having aristocratic responsibilities.
And I know a couple of guys that they've got. I actually have one friend that he went to an Ivy League school up in New York. I'm blanking on which one it was, but he knows absolutely nothing at all. Like history major, can't even tell you. I mean, he can't even tell you that the date of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's how like dumb he is. And it's really sad because you expect people from these elite institutions to bring something to the table besides, I went there, I partied, I passed my classes, and that was it. And they bring nothing to the table, no higher pursuits, no they can't educate the lower classes or the middle classes in what they learn. It was just a check the box. My dad got me into this university, and that's it.
Well, we're getting close to 9:30. It's probably good to go ahead and start winding it down. To end on a brighter note, you can't join the Ivy, but there's like our fellow officer was saying, there's really no good reason to join the Ivies, but you can join the Old Glory Club, which is a legitimate magnet for very real talent and very real potential. And even though we all have to have jobs, we're not really aristocrats ourselves. We can still come together and build something, which is really kind of the theme of the whole evening. And so, on that note, we're very thankful for all of you who showed up. And anyone here who's not a member of the Old Glory Club, in some chapter. If you're in North Carolina, send your application to us. If you're in another state, send it to your state's chapter. Or if there's not a chapter in your area, then it is not that hard to form one. You can speak to us or anyone else in the Old Glory Club, and they'll get you a link to Central, and then they will give you instructions on how to move forward. Let's see. Is there anything else our guests would like to sort of add before we close out for the evening?
I don't think so. Hunger, you got anything?
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that point. If you don't have a chapter in your own state, as we've been saying, you can just do things. You can just make one and just start from there. It's a funny story how the Delaware Crossing Society came together, because both me and Drew were at the OGC conferences, and I barely remember talking to him. And this was 3 years in a row.
Yeah, no.
And because there were so many people there. And so after one of the mini events on the East Coast, which was I think predated the OGC, yeah, there was also the basket weaving as well. Like, we had met some people over basket weaving, and we didn't really we came together in an interesting way, and none of us really knew each other. The five officers, myself, the president, vice president, secretary, and so on, treasurer. None of us really knew each other. Maybe we had met one or two times individually, but when we came together, we all fell in line very quickly, divided the officer positions very quickly, and established, like, we're doing this. This is what we're here for. We're gonna get shit done. And I think the results pretty much speak for itself. And we're not even close to getting started yet.
Not even close. We are. I think I could pretty safely speak for all of the people who are creating these chapters and running them, that we want this to be an enduring institution. Like, we want this to be like the real deal, and we're going to make it be the real deal, because you can just do things.
Yeah, and just to remind people, it's a great social club. The Old Glory Club is a really fantastic social club. It's basically become like all the friends I could have ever asked for in life. It's that much fun. But at the same time, when you're organizing and planning and doing stuff, you're here to do a job. You're here to get stuff done. And if you're not getting stuff done, then maybe you should try.
Well, and frankly, doing meaningful work together is one of the main pillars of male friendship anyway. So really, you just get both together. They're the same package deal.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, it really is great. We encourage everyone here who's not already a member to apply or create something. It's really, Central's done a good job of making that pretty streamlined. As far as other officers of the NGS, is there anything else we'd like to say before we close out?
No, sir. Just thank you all for coming on tonight. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
It was great.
I guess I'd like to throw a few cents in from OGC Central. I was involved with the sort of, I guess, what would you call the basket weaving era of organization, Mr. Hunger?
2021 to 2023.
Yeah, that was like that was a pretty rough era, but it like all these things have sort of like a incubation period where everyone finds their kind of footing, and eventually everything kind of falls into line, and you can really just do things after a certain point.
Yeah, it's funny. That was not a. I mean, it was interesting, and like some fun things did come out of that, but like it was out of necessity after COVID. I mean, I don't think any of us or most of us would be here if it wasn't for COVID. Whether we were already right wing before COVID, like COVID really got us gave us a kick in the ass to actually get connected IRL.
Yeah, COVID definitely changed the culture of the right. I think in an overall good way. Although there was like some trade-offs that came with that, but overall it was good. I think you're right. I think the current efforts really weren't even on the table prior, so that's something we can be thankful for despite everything.
COVID and the free and fair, the totally free TM and totally free or totally fair TM election of 2020.
Oh yeah, Donald. Yeah, the quote unquote loss that turned into probably our biggest win in 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, funny how that works.
Yeah, it is. Well, God's providence is kind in that way. Something you learn over time.
So true.
But, yep. Well, I think we are good to go unless there's anything pressing. We thank everyone for showing up. We like hosting these. We're thankful for everyone who shows up and contributes. It really makes the event. And we will be back as scheduled at 8 p.m. same time next week. And we look forward to seeing you and anyone else who shows up then. Have a good evening.
See ya.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank y'all.